Hello, and welcome to Wine with Weeda, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Weeda. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Today on Wine with Weeda, I'm sitting down with Nikolina Kharoufeh. Nikolina is a writer, a journalist, the author of My Mummy Loves Fudge, and the host of the Baby Playbook podcast. She's also a mum of what feels like a soccer team full of boys and someone who shares motherhood with so much honesty and heart. In today's conversation, we will talk about her journey into motherhood, pregnancy, loss, and the strength she's found through it all. Nikolina, welcome to Wine with Weeda.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rita. I'm so excited to record even after, a really exhausting day with the kids and the newborn. This has been on my mind and getting me through the challenges of the day. So thank you so much.
I'm so glad I get to share this space with you with all your energy, but I really look forward to this conversation and I'm sure it'll be an amazing episode. Nikolina, the irony is my sister Nikki or Nicole, she bought your book, My Mummy Loves Fudge, for my niece, and my niece adored it. And I was like, I want to know this woman. I've seen her pop up on my social media, but I didn't follow you. But once I was starting to read the book, it just really sparked love in my heart as a speech pathologist, knowing this mother has connected with her own experience into the book so kids can feel that relatability. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, can you share a bit about yourself? And we'll dig deep into the book shortly after.
Yeah, certainly so. So I'm a mum of 3 now. When I wrote the book, I was only a mum of 1, so it's been quite a while, and it's such an awesome journey since then. But yeah, I myself, in terms of profession, I'm a newsreader and a journalist, and have been a bit of a writer for the past decade in all sorts of different realms, whether it be, creative writing, but also journalism. So writing's always been kind of behind a lot of what I do, hence why the book was such a passion project of mine. And yeah, at the moment I'm in the thick of motherhood, but I also want to say, mothering is not the only thing I do. I also have a life of my own, which I'm, very lucky to have support around me to be able to, I love to see my friends. I'm a big foodie, love to travel. Yeah.
Used to that.
Yeah. And yeah, at the moment, just kind of loving life and yeah, just the big ones for me is family, friends, good food, and a good time. That's kind of me wrapped up in an explanation.
I love how you've said the big F's: family, food, fun, faith. And that's all embodied in the wonderful journey of motherhood. But what I love specifically is you said, I'm not just a mum, I'm also all these other things. And for myself, one of the biggest blessings I want to teach my daughters is motherhood is amazing and such a privilege and an honor. However, I love also being speechy. I love fine dining with my friends. I love doing all those bits. And sometimes as mothers, we tend to feel guilty by tapping into those other elements of happiness. How did you navigate that when you had your first son?
It was a big transition. And I think for anyone going into motherhood for the first time, I always explain it. For me, it was like I was hit by a bus. I think I was just like, and understandably so, because everybody is, I was very ignorant to the fact that how much it would change my life. So it was a real big change for me and a huge journey personally, and when it came to my identity and who I was as well. So I have been very open, especially on my socials, about the fact that when I did have Noah, my first, I certainly went through some postnatal blues.
Mm,
That for me was very evident from the start, really. I felt like my life had changed so dramatically. I had no time to myself. I could barely see my friends. I could barely string a sentence together. All the things like I had all this time with my husband before that. We had just gotten married, and then all of a sudden, we didn't even have like a minute to give each other a hug. I felt like everything that kind of made me who I was, even also my job, I had obviously stopped working because I was on maternity
mm,
leave. Everything was like pulled out from under me, and all I was doing was focusing on this child. Um, and so, yeah, the first few months of motherhood, really, I would say pretty rough for me. Coming to that realization of things have changed dramatically. Um, and then also deep, kind of delving a little bit into, that realm of postnatal blues and
mm.
sadness and anxiety, feelings that I never really had before either. Like I never was an anxious person. I never was, somebody who would get lonely or sad or feel isolated. So these were really fresh feelings for me.
Mm.
But, as I've also explained and talked about really openly, is I noticed that was happening to me. I knew who I was, and I could see that was changing. And when I say, I don't mean the changes in terms of like, physically having to look after a baby and losing, the time to see friends and stuff. I could see my qualities changing. So
Yes.
my usually bubbly personality was like nowhere to be seen. My usual positive outlook was now a very negative Nancy one. And so I sought some help at that time, which I feel very lucky that I could recognize that.
Mm.
And that was a huge blessing for me. Once I kind of started to really um, identify it, work on myself, work through, of course, the hard challenges of having a newborn, having a 6-month old, having a 9-month old. We started to kind of come out of that a little bit, which was
Yeah.
nice.
It's so fascinating, and I think I can relate to this in some way, like where I'm at high school, high achieving, transition to university, doing really well at university, getting a great career, smashing it in the work field, right? And I felt like I was always on the go of achieving great
Mm,
things from a career perspective, and my social circle was brilliant. And then when the baby comes, it's like, what's there to do? I've mopped the floor 3 times
yeah.
now. I've stocked the pantry, and it's like our brains are wired to always do, and I don't think we've ever given our body and our mind that chance or even permission to say, it's okay to stop. And I found that personally hard. And I was navigating the grief of the sudden death of my uncle right at that time, too. So I was similar, where I'm navigating these emotions that I've never experienced before in my whole life, but then finding that support, which I love how you've said that. And I feel any mother listening here and if experiencing what Nicolina expressed, there is no shame to saying, I'm not okay. There's no
Yeah.
shame or negativity to saying, I need help, or even having a boundary of, no, I can't do that. And I feel like once you have that self awareness that Nicolina expressed, that somehow opens a massive gate for you to obtain the right support that you need.
Yeah, certainly so. And it's hard. Like, it's hard
Mm,
to, I remember saying to myself, oh, like, tomorrow's going to be much better. Tomorrow's going to be fine. We've just had a rough day. But tomorrow was like never fine. It just was this
mm,
never ending cycle. And it's really hard to kind of, I found it to admit to myself to say, oh, I think I actually am not okay. I think, in terms of not just a little bit sad, I think I'm actually moving into, potentially, some depression here, or potentially something
mm,
that's a bit more than just a little bit anxious. I'm actually getting very worked up about things, and I don't know how to handle it. I think that's really scary, and it was for me as well. I had never gone to therapy. I had never spoken to a psychologist before or anything like that. So that's really scary. But what I say to people is, you're never ever going to regret asking for help, even if, let's say, you
Yes.
didn't need it, right? Like, let's just say, you just did it because you thought, oh, I'm kind of feeling a bit off. That conversation's not wasted, or that
Mm.
phone call to, I always talk about the Panda hotline in Australia, which I think is an amazing service. Um, you're not going to regret that phone call. So just do it and just give yourself a little bit of a leg up and a helping hand.
Yeah. Do you feel because of your need to do things, that's what inspired you to write the book, like as that little side project in motherhood?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I was very like you, Rita. I always talk about when I had Noah, I was at like a bit of a career peak as well.
Yeah.
I had this really fun job in radio, a job where I was going out to events all the time. This is
I
pre-COVID.
love that. That's
Go,
the best life.
it was so fun. It was so fun.
Fun.
I'm talking, like going out, but waking up for breakfast radio hours because, who needs to sleep, that sort of thing. It was just, I felt like I was in this really full time in my life. And on top of that, I also remember one of the opportunities that I was given at the time, which I was doing a few presenting roles, was I actually presented a getaway segment, which just was such a
Wow.
dream of mine. I thought, like, I can't believe this is happening. And a week before I gave birth, it actually aired on TV. So that's just such a, like, I feel like that's such a summary of where I was at career wise. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, amazing things. And then a week later, I'm like, covered in like milk, and I don't know who I am. And so it's such a difference
I'm
in
laughing
time
because it's like two
situation.
polar opposites,
Yeah,
right?
polar, like what? um but one of the things I will say, after, I'm in this deep pit of newbornness, I'm feeling really anxious, I finally, sort out some help and starting to feel a bit more like myself. One thing that I really drew on during this time was humor, because I just always, I would be in these situations, right? And you would know you're a mum, that you're like,
Yeah.
you can only laugh. Like, I can
Laugh.
only laugh at how ridiculous this situation is, whether it's like there's food all over the floor, or whether it's like you're singing a song while like banging a wooden spoon, trying to keep your baby awake till the next nap time so they don't do a cat nap. Like, just ridiculous
Yeah.
situations. And so that's where kind of I started to share a little bit online in terms of like the humorous side of motherhood, because I thought, if we're all in this together, if we're really, like, we're tired and we're struggling, and sometimes we're sad and sometimes we miss our old life, if we can just laugh a little bit about the situation, and if we can just, have a giggle, um, it's nice. It's just
Yeah.
nice to smile and crack a joke. So that slowly led to the concept of the book, which, I'll explain now. It's called My Mummy Loves Fudge. Fudge stands for another
Or
kind of
F.
word starting with
Yeah.
F that we
Yeah.
can't quite say around our kids. So it's just like that humorous take on, I guess, the mundane moments, the crazy moments, the exhausting moments of motherhood. Um, and that's where that idea flowed from. I started working on it because, again, I got quite excited when I had the idea. I had something to keep me going, a little bit of a side project. And I also really wanted to write the book not just for kids, but for mums, because there was nothing really on my shelf that was for me. And, I know you're a speech pathologist, Rita, but I was so sick of reading, the
Spot.
ABC. Yeah, like, oh God, And I just thought, I just want something fun to read. I just want something like fun and interesting and that I'd be into. So that's where kind of the idea was born.
Love it. As a speaker, can I say those ABC books are not what I recommend. Those
Okay.
books, I love them for the single word use, yeah, but those creative books like Spot is one of my favorites. Even those books with the felt on top or even the different textures,
Yes.
they're my favorite because the
Okay.
creativity with the language and the vocabulary is endless rather than looking at a picture and say, apple, banana, ball. Like, how
Yeah.
repetitive does it seem? And then there's no joint attention. It just seems like a robotic talk. So yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for creating that book. Um, So then what led you to the podcast? Did you feel there was a missing niche in the podcasting world that you could access as a mum in that time when you were navigating motherhood? Or did you feel many mums didn't have their concerns met?
Yeah, I think with the podcast, first and foremost, I after I had my second, or sorry, just before I had my second, I started to work for Nine Honey as a parenting writer, and that's
Mm.
kind of a role I fell into because one, I had done some writing, and two, I was a parent, so it was really such an amazing role because I could basically answer questions I had about my own kids by
Yes.
doing my work, by
Yes.
contacting an expert, by writing the latest news or writing about the latest products. It was really, it came at absolutely the perfect time. But through that, I made obviously a lot of connections, a lot of sleep experts, nutritionists, speechies, like just everybody in that parenting space. And I always found it really fascinating speaking to people about the latest research and, the latest findings and what the recommendations were for different age groups. So that's kind of the foundation of what started for me the idea of launching a podcast and speaking to all these professionals. But the main aim of the Baby Playbook podcast, because I know there are so many parenting podcasts out there, is what I want to do is I want to directly answer the questions that parents are Googling. So
Yes.
when I say that, I mean, the whole point of my podcast is, for example, let's just, example, bring up baby sleep.
Mm.
That's a huge one. That's a big popular topic that I talk about because, it's a really challenging part of having a baby. Um, I tackle, for example, what is sleep training? What is awake time? What is, or how should you dress your baby during the cold, during the warmer?
Mm.
Because I felt like I was listening to these podcasts of people's opinions about everything rather than the actual facts that I needed.
Answer. Mm.
I needed an answer. So hence why, the titles of all of my episodes are what we're actually Googling. You'll find that
Yes.
everything is a
Ah.
question because that's what I want to deliver. I want to deliver the answer to you from the expert. And I, my whole thing is I know that people don't have time. So it's within 20 to
Yes.
25 minutes is the episode because I don't have more time to
Yeah,
listen to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Sometimes I
It's like a
have
bite
to break
size.
up bite-sized.
Mm.
So that was really my aim is I found it quite frustrating sometimes, if I wanted to learn about baby sleep, I'd have to listen to, 4 to 5 different opinions on what I should do rather than actually, I just want to know what the facts are.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do with the podcast. And I'm really passionate about getting that information out there because as you would know, Rita, I don't know about you, I walked out of that hospital with no knowledge on
Mhm.
anything. I didn't know what I was meant to do to settle a baby, what I was meant to do when it came to breastfeeding. You feel really lost, and I don't want parents to feel that way. So that's there for.
Yeah. As a mum, I wish I had that podcast when my daughters were much younger. And the irony is, yes, I work in pediatrics. Yes, I have awareness in developmental milestones. But the minute my daughter left the hospital, I couldn't cope with her lack of sleep. I found it really hard to keep her settled. And what did I do? She got a dummy. She had a dummy.
Yeah,
And as a speechy, what do we say? No dummy. And guess what? All my daughters had a dummy. And this is so
I know.
important that even though evidence says X, research says this, but there's also the reality of lived experience. What can you
Mm.
manage and how can you tackle both, but still have that mindset that, okay, my daughter's having the dummy now. However, don't use it during play. Don't use it too much in her mouth because that can impact her facial structure. So it's like taking the bit of the bad, not necessarily the bad, the negatives, and then the positives, and then making an executive decision, which is so important for parents to know that, yes, evidence is right. However, no one knows what it's like to live in your shoes in the moment.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And even just using that example of the dummy, for me, when I remember an episode that I did about sleep aids, and one of the questions was directly, what's a negative sleep aid? What's a positive sleep aid? Because I want to put the information out there. I want the expert to give you the information, but then we make our decisions based on
Mm,
that, right? So I make it, a real big point that I'm not delivering an episode on any topic of babies because I'm trying to convince you to follow that method or that this is the best or, whatever it is. I'm giving you the information, and then we as parents, we have different personalities, we have different
mm.
ways of handling, the pressure or whatever it is, or different comfort levels as well. Then you go, great, I've got this information. I'm going to go and do with it what I want based on the parent that I am or the type of person that I am.
Yeah, so important. Thank you for sharing. Now, let's talk about your boys. How old is your eldest and what's his name?
So Noah is 5
5.
now.
And number 2?
Leo is just about to turn 4, so had them very close together, the first
Yeah.
two.
I had 3 under 3, so I understand. And then baby number 3, what's his name? Is it Hugo? No, that's number 1.
Hugo, yes,
Hugo.
yes. So we just welcomed Hugo into the world. He's a complicated one. He came early, but he's technically corrected age just a few weeks old. So very much a newborn at the
Now,
moment.
I remember I can't remember exactly when, but it's last year, you announced you're pregnant with twins.
Yes.
And having 2 already, what was that like? Knowing that you're having another 2 on the way?
It was, I think it's like just how you imagine it to be. I,
Stunned.
we had 2 very close together, Noah and Leo, and we took a bit of a break. And that wasn't for any kind of particular reason. I think just life, we moved
Mhm.
houses and we've had kids start preschool, whatever it might be. And
Life.
we started to chat about, okay, well, is this it? Or, do we go for a third? I'm one of 3. I really like that dynamic. My husband's one of 3. He
I'm
was a
one of
little bit
3.
more,
Yeah.
you know, I think he was more, I'm happy with whatever you decide. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's go for the third. I'm really keen. So yeah,
Are you
obviously
hoping
when
for a girl?
we,
Maybe a
oh,
little
I get
girl.
this a
Yeah.
lot. I get this a lot. I think
Because I
I
hope for a
was,
boy. I have 3 daughters and I still have that, oh, I wouldn't
oh,
mind having a little one. Yeah.
we're the opposite. I was, you know what? I thought it would be really nice to have a girl. And then girls also terrify me. So I also said
Really?
to myself, yeah, and
They're
I also was
emotional.
very honest that I was like, if I had a boy, I kind of wouldn't mind as well. Because, I kind
Yeah.
of know
Okay.
boys. I'm like very comfortable with them at this point. So I didn't mind. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just like, it's just like any scene that you would imagine. We went to the scan. My husband happened to be at the scan, and this is like, it's, I always talk about this because this is, whatever you believe in, I believe in God, and I know that he put all these things in place. And my
Mm.
husband happened to be working from home. He never came to a single appointment with the second one, but was like, yeah, I'll come to this scan, with the
Yeah.
third one. So we're in the room, and yeah, she said, "Look, there's 2 in there." Um, and it's funny, I go back to humor because we just started to laugh. We
Yeah.
were like, "Oh my gosh, what an absolute like joke! This is crazy." We just thought this is wild. Um, and I'm a big planner, so I went into
Yes.
a
Same.
immediate
We need 2 of
planning,
everything. Yep.
you know,
Annual leave, need to figure it out. Yep.
all of
Yep.
it. I definitely had, my moments that I like had some. I remember there was one night where I was really freaking out because, of course, when you kind of like mentally plan and go, okay, let's have a third, it'd be nice, it'll be a bit hard financially, it's 2026, all that stuff. But then to be like thrust into, you're about to be a family of 6, you're
Mm.
about to have twins, 2 babies at
Mm.
once, I definitely was overwhelmed. Like I definitely had my moments where I was like, this is not what I planned. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to handle this. But you move on and you
Figure it
you
out,
you
figure it
keep
out.
going to your appointments and you start to get. I think we definitely were starting to get quite excited about it. We obviously found out they were 2 boys, so
Yes.
I realized I cannot.
Identical as well?
Yeah, I cannot make
Yeah.
a girl. I just can't. Yes, so they were identical. They were MCDA twins, which, you start to learn a lot about twins once you kind of get that confirmation. So they basically had their own sacs. They were identical and they shared a placenta. So yeah, so that's kind of the start of the journey. And then obviously going into appointments and working, and everything was kind of just flowing along really
Yeah.
nicely. Yeah.
So, being pregnant with twins, there are some complications and it's considered a high risk pregnancy. You've openly shared your own experiences and the challenges you had. Let's start talking about the moment things started to shift in the pregnancy with the twins.
Yeah. So when you find out the type of twins you're having, the doctors are really great in explaining to you all the potential complications and why it might be a bit high risk, and all that stuff. And I remember actually my first appointment when they confirmed what type of twins they were. And I remember the doctor, he drew this kind of like picture and he was like, this is where they share the placenta. And he specifically spoke about a condition that's called TTTS, and it's twin to twin transfusion syndrome. And it's one of the more common complications of twins. And to put it very simply, it's where there's a bit of a discrepancy in how they share the placenta. So, and that can be a range of things. It can be blood flow, it can be nutrients, it can be, the connections that they share. At the time, I had never experienced a complicated pregnancy. Really cruised through Noah, cruised through even more with Leo because I didn't have time to think about it. He was the
Yeah.
second. So I listened, of course, but I just, you think, oh, that'll never happen to me.
It's just a statistic.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, they just have to
Mm.
tick that box. They have to let you know. Um, so we started to go to each of our appointments. Of course, high risk pregnancy, you have more frequent scans. And I was getting fortnightly scans.
Oh,
And I
that's
had
close.
Yeah, it was really busy. It
Yeah.
was a busy pregnancy, and again, really different from my other two, where I just,
Mm.
I think I went into like two scans with Leo, and that's it.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
at the start, one at the end.
And at the end.
Yeah. Um, so I had developed a kind of bit of a routine with it. I'd go into my appointment, get the scan. They'd give you the AOK, you'd grab a beautiful photo, I'd send it to Nick, I'd give him the AOK, and I'd go to work. But unfortunately, I think, yeah, it was, like it was my worst nightmare had happened on one of those scans. I went
How
in
far were you?
to, so I was at my 24-week scan.
24-week scan. Okay.
Yeah. So that's, for people who are familiar with pregnancy, you've already done your morphology scan and that was completely fine. All my scans previous to this were completely fine. They always track the discrepancy and that was very normal. So again, adding to, I felt like I had nothing to worry about. And, you know, the lady's doing her scan and she says, I'm just going to go grab the doctor for a little bit. And that was a bit weird. I was like, that's a bit weird. And within, I want to say, like 20 minutes of that moment, I was sitting in a consultation room with two doctors, with Nick, my husband, on loudspeaker because he was at work. And they were telling me that one of our twins, Micah, is the name we gave him, is very in the very, I guess, a dangerous state. He had stopped growing. He had lost all of the amniotic fluid around his sac, and his heart rate was struggling, and that I was in a stage 3 TTTS diagnosis, which,
Wow.
remember, 2 weeks before,
Nothing.
nothing wrong, nothing.
Mm.
So it's, that's, I think I'm safe to say, one of the worst moments of my life. And also, I think back on that moment and I think I just thought I was like in a nightmare. I thought I, I just need to like wake up from this moment. I don't think this is
Yeah.
real. I don't know what you're like saying to me. What are you talking about? From then, it was really quick. So obviously, they take it really seriously. What's happening? We were sent to a specialist hospital. With twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, you can treat it with a laser surgery. So that's the hospital we were sent to. But again, unfortunately, in our case, that night, after undergoing a few more scans and speaking to a few specialists and doctors, it was unsafe to perform the surgery. There wasn't enough fluid to be able to get in there safely, and it was a bit too risky for not only Micah but also Hugo, who
Twin.
was in.
Yeah.
Now, I will say the other very confronting part of this is that it's not just this situation can't just negatively affect one twin, it's very bad for both. So in my mind, I thought, oh, okay, so if one's smaller, one's, lacking nutrition, something's wrong, surely, the other one's got enough nutrition.
Okay. Yeah.
But no.
Mm.
So I'm being told that this can be very bad for both. And we walked out of that hospital being told that there was a 60% chance we would have 2 babies by the end of this, and an 80% chance we'd have 1. So go home. That's a Thursday. On the Friday, and I've never really considered myself a very, intuition kind of person, or, I have my motherly instincts, but I'm not at all, like a queen bee of
Yeah.
motherhood. But I just felt a bit off. And I thought to myself, okay, we've been told to come back on Monday for another checkup in the hope that there's enough fluid to perform the surgery to help Micah. But I thought, it's the weekend. I don't want to wait the whole weekend, And I thought,
Mm.
I'll go in. They offered, they said, if at any point you want to come and get a quick scan done to check on them, come in. So I said, I'm going to do it. It's Friday. They're closed over the weekend, So I went to the hospital. I went by myself because my husband.
Nick, was that a good decision? Looking back,
It
was that the
wasn't.
best decision? No.
Not at all. And, I'm a very like, no, it's fine.
I've
I'm just
got
going to
this.
pop in. Yeah, I'm just going to pop
Yeah.
in. And of course I thought, I just going to go in and check the heart rates. Like, that's just what I want to do. And I didn't want to
Mm.
bother anyone um, but yeah, so I get in and I get on the table, and the doctor starts scanning, and it was like that immediate, like something was,
Face.
yeah.
Mm.
So at that point, Micah had already passed, so they couldn't pick up a heart rate for him. So of course I'm there by myself, with this strange doctor in the room who was the nicest guy. And, I always feel for these professionals who have to, navigate you through this. And, he said some of the sweetest things. And he said, you obviously knew as a mother that he was gone. I knew I was going to get emotional, but that really stuck with me, because I felt like that was my way of like being his mum. I haven't really had the chance to be his mum, but that for me was a really significant moment of connection with him. And yeah, so that was kind of the moment that we lost Micah. But at the same time, we had another baby in there. So I don't even know how, but you have to kind of like pick yourself back up and put
Yeah.
your focus into Hugo
Doing it for
because
Hugo. Yeah.
he's still there.
Yeah.
And of course, as I mentioned, we had to have chats about him and the impact on him. And there was a lot of chat about you know, with neurological teams, you can have real negative impacts to his brain function, things like that. So I don't know how I did it, but at the time I went from everything's fine, you've lost a baby, your other baby could be, severely
Impacted.
impacted
Yeah.
within the span of 48 hours. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was that
Wow,
moment.
Nick. Just
Yeah.
the wave of emotions over that fortnight to everything's great. I'm just at my weekly scan to hearing the complications and knowing I could possibly leave 80% chance leave with one to 60% leaving with two. I always think when you were talking, if you left that scan to Monday, would Hugo have been impacted more because of his brother passing?
It could, yeah, it could have been. At that point, I think the doctors had realized just how severe the situation had been. So
Sure.
things
Mm,
really like sped up from that point.
yeah,
So I certainly know that it helped, move things along, and ensure that, by that point, then it was all systems go on Hugo and
yeah,
checking him. And I was in that hospital like every couple of days for a
yeah.
scan, for an ultrasound, for an appointment.
It was like
Um,
Micah saying, "Do it for Hugo too. Do it for my other
yeah,
brothers, Leo," and yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, certainly. Um,
That's more than a mother's intuition to me. That's
yeah,
the Lord's, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was definitely the Lord's work. And I know,
yeah,
and I think about that often about, you're never going to answer to, you're never going to get an answer to as to
no.
why things happen. We just don't have that privilege in this life.
Mm,
But I like to think that something had happened and, Micah, in some sense, knew that there was risk to both of them.
mm,
And, and he passed and, I can explain a bit more, but Hugo's amazing now and doing really, really well. And I think he has a lot to thank his brother for in that
yeah.
sense, you know?
And Hugo's middle name is Micah, isn't it?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So um, we hadn't actually chosen names at that point, but we, knew, of course, that we were going to name both of them regardless of what the situation had happened. And Micah actually was a Bible verse that
Mm,
I had randomly scrolled past on my feed, and it just was like a perfect fit for the situation and who I believe he is, and who he is to the family and myself, and so that was really fitting and a really
do you
beautiful
care to
moment. And I
share the
think
phrase?
it is. I've got to get it up. I believe it's something along the lines of, even if I fall, I will still rise again,
Yeah,
which just, I know that, I know he's up there. I know he's our
yeah,
angel. I know that he's looking out for us. I know that we're, so blessed in a sense to have him up there, and for all of us, not just me, for my husband, for Noah, for Leo, who already, have a really beautiful connection with him and they've never even met him, always talking about him, always referring to him. Um, so, yeah, really fitting when I saw it, and a really special moment for Hugo to always have that reminder as his middle
yeah.
name, that he had that connection, that his brother's, still there and watching over him.
I really feel that's beautiful. And just hearing you speak so openly about this, Nicola, you are so full of optimism, faith, and such a powerhouse of navigating this challenging time, which is such an inspiration to so many other mothers going through a similar situation, or even their child's diagnosis of a disability, that this not necessarily is meant to happen, but there's a reason to this. This is the reason that we're going to guide you through this. And there is always something that's there going to guide you and make you better in this situation too.
Yeah, and that's really hard. I think for me, at the start, and I want to be honest about this because I think it's really important. I was very angry. Like
Mm,
I was upset. I was like, why? Like I always said in my thoughts and like my prayers, I was asking God, I don't understand. Like I feel like I'm an okay person. What have I done? It doesn't work that way, and I know it doesn't work that way, but that's the raw feelings that you have at the start,
mm,
is and um I remember the doctors saying specifically, wow, we haven't seen a case like this where it's happened so rapidly. And I thought, well, how unlucky. I don't want to be
yeah.
that case. I don't want to be that case. I don't want to be the one in whatever it is that happened so rapidly we couldn't do anything to save him. We couldn't have done anything to pick it up earlier. You kind of don't want that. You want to be the case that, something happened and then we take the small steps to fix it and whatever it may be. But it wasn't to be in our case. So I was very angry at the start. I was very obviously sad. I think what helped me push through that and those raw emotions was, I think, being a mum. I had to be a mum. I had a baby to grow still.
Mm,
I had appointments to go to. I had my other two, nagging at me for snacks. They didn't really care that I was like crying in the kitchen. But like that was so needed at that time. I needed that. I needed them to need me because
mm,
I would have just been in like a pit of sadness, and that wasn't going to be good for anybody. Myself, Hugo, who you know, I'm being told that I need to, relax and not stress because the baby's still growing. And here I am, grieving a child.
yeah.
I needed that. And I think that was the saving grace for me, is having children who pulled me out of the sadness and pulled me out of the anxiety. That was weeks of scans and appointments and an MRI and, neurologists and talking to all these people, stressing about the impact on Hugo, trying to get as far along in the pregnancy as I could because they told me I could go into labor at any point. I was only at 24 weeks. I was freaking out. Um, yeah, but you have to keep going. You're a mum,
Yeah.
right? We have to keep
You don't
going.
stop. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would feel your older boys such a blessing to just be them and not take on the negativity of the situation, because that their positivity helped you get by day and to get through scan by scan. At what turning point did you give birth to Hugo? What was that week? Was it not long after?
Yeah, so my waters broke at 29 weeks.
Okay, so
Um,
close to 30. Were you hoping to get to
yes,
30? Like, yeah,
I
just make it
was
to 30.
hoping, and I actually did give birth on 30. So my
Yeah.
waters broke, but it took a couple of days, which was great. I was geared up and ready to settle into hospital because I was told, look, your waters have broken, but you could be here till the end.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't get that getaway. So I went into labor a couple of days later on the 30 mark. So yeah, 6 weeks. I obviously stayed pregnant. One of the, I guess, challenges at that time was I wasn't just growing Hugo, but I was also still carrying Micah.
Mm.
And for me, that was, mentally a challenge, but, kept going, kept, trying to be positive and praying and leaning on those around me to get through that moment. And then we gave birth. Um, really lucky in terms of when it all happened. And I will say that I went into labor because Micah's waters broke. So he technically put me into
Yeah.
labor. But of course, once your waters break, and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
body, goes into the process. So he got us to 30 weeks, which was great. And then Hugo was welcomed into the world, straight into the NICU. Um, Again, a really challenging time, and something I thought about for
Mm.
weeks leading up to it, because of course I knew that when Hugo came, Michael was also going to be delivered. Um, so I want to commend the hospital. Was amazing in terms of like the support services, the people around us, the doctors, the nurses, the midwives. Everybody knew what the situation was very helpful, was very emotionally, supportive. We had some beautiful moments with Micah in the hospital as well. Of course, giving birth to him was emotionally really challenging, but we got a chance to meet him, um, physically at least, and then spend some time with him as well on a couple of occasions. And then at the same time, we had Hugo, who was in the NICU. Of course, I stayed at the hospital for a little while, going up and down. Many NICU mums would relate to the you're in your room and you've given birth, but you don't actually have a baby around, which is a struggle in
Mm.
itself. But for me at that point, I just felt so lucky that we had gotten to a place where Hugo was there and he was with us,
Yeah.
and we were able to, care for him and start, you know, growing him and making sure that he was okay. That was a long journey. We had 8 weeks at the NICU, 62 days. And then we finally got to bring him home, and we've been home, and he is, yeah, really amazing. He's, he had an amazing stay in the NICU. We didn't have too many medical challenges, which was really lucky. In the NICU, many mums have experienced, having a baby stay there, and you see families around you in really challenging situations. So it really gives you a lot of like opportunity to be grateful, opportunity to lean on the professionals, and hope that they're in the best place. Um, and we were, yeah, really lucky to go through and come home and have him here. And he's super chunky now. You wouldn't think he was a
Oh,
NICU
love it.
baby. He's chunky. He's very heavy to hold. All those things. It keeps me up all night. All the fun things now.
I was gonna say, how did you navigate? Were you able to breastfeed? Like, did you have to pump for him at that time? How was that? Like, you couldn't feed him, but then you had to express, and we know that skin to skin helps stimulate the milk. And I can imagine your personality type, possibly pumping all the time to stimulate the milk always.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? And now, is he able to breastfeed? Are you still transitioned on the bottle?
Yeah, so that is a bizarre situation as well, because again, remember, I've had two kids where I've just,
Yes.
popped them on, and like we've figured out where the nipple is and all that stuff has happened. With Hugo coming so early, and with many babies, of course, coming, even earlier or even slightly later, they just don't have that energy to breastfeed. So
Yeah.
pumping is where it's at. They give you that pump, of course, if you choose to. Of course, if you don't, that's also okay. But for me, and you just said it as well, Rita, my personality, I actually really loved having this project. The project for
Yes,
me was
yes. Thank
getting
you for
milk.
calling it a project because, as
Yeah.
I said earlier, my first was born at a time my uncle had passed and she was having lots of trouble latching. And I was adamant, like, no, I've got the supply. She's
Mm,
going to get it. So I would wake up 2 times a night and pump for her as a way to also distract me from the emotion that I'm
yeah.
trying to deal with. And in my culture, my family did not let me go to my uncle's funeral because there's this
Yeah.
conception that
We are the
if you are
same.
sad, that can impact the connection with your newborn baby and your milk supply. So it was like I was forbidden. I felt like a child again at that moment. Looking back, it's something that I regret, but I understand what you meant by project. I was
Mm.
on a mission and I pumped milk till she was 10 months of age. But
Oh
when
my
my
gosh,
second was
amazing.
born, I said, nah, she has to learn how to suck it because I'm not
Yeah.
going to do this again. Because my back was in agony from all the leaning and, as you know, right?
It's quite it's a full-time job. It's a
Mm.
full-time job, it felt like. But again, I needed something. I needed
Yeah.
something to focus on. When I was in the hospital in recovery, um, I obviously, like, I needed a reason to see him, and that was it. I didn't have a
Mm.
baby crying and waking me up at night. So I would put my alarm on, I'd pump, I'd walk upstairs with, at that point, actually, I wasn't even pumping. I was like with the syringe because you're just trying to get your
Yeah.
milk in, you know? So that for me was really great focus. Again, same time, I also have still lost Micah, and I also,
Mm.
had that to deal with. So I felt like it was nice to have something,
With
not to distract me
purpose.
from that. I was thinking about him, and I was starting to grieve him and whatever I was doing, and starting to, delve into those feelings a bit more. But I had that purpose, as you say, I had something to keep me going. So
Mm.
yeah, at the moment, he's 3 months old, but corrected a few weeks old. I pumped. We did get to the point at which he was breastfeeding, which was amazing. But as with a lot of premature babies, they don't have the
Fuck.
energy to get a full
Mm.
feed. So for me, of course, with two other kids coming home, and I remember, that first week we came home, I would breastfeed and then give him a bottle top up from pumping, and then I would pump again. Not sustainable. So I have been super crazy this time around because I have to be. I have other kids around. I'm trying to give him the best shot at gaining weight. So at the moment we're still pumping. We're on EBM all the time and feeding with a bottle, and that works for us. It works really well. Um, so we'll see how long we last. I'm not at all against formula or anything like that. If I want to reach for it, I will. But for now, we're doing really well with that kind of routine, that pumping routine.
Well, I love this new project. You have Mum Loves Fudge, then the podcast, and now you're an
Yes,
expert in multiple pumps. I love
yes,
this new
yes.
project for you. Um, what support did you access as you're trying to celebrate the birth of your beautiful son, but then also grieving the loss? Like, it's how do you navigate the two heavy emotions? What support did you get to help you guide or to guide you through that grief?
So
Which you're probably still
I
experiencing now as well, Nick.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
doesn't
totally.
end.
And I
Yeah.
think I don't think it will end. I think, and that's
Mm.
something I've had to, come to terms with as well, because the type of person I am, I'm very like, okay, this is the situation. Let's deal with the situation. Let's move on. I've had to be very, like, I've had to come down to a very, I have to lean into this. I have to accept that this situation is something that will stay with me forever. Micah is someone that I will always miss. I'll always grieve. Um, and that's tough for me to do, but I'm getting a little bit better at that. Um, for me, there was a few different pillars of support, and there continues to be. So, number one is my husband. I think
Mm.
we have like a very strong relationship and a very open relationship in terms of communication. I think that, we've been able to share, you know, some of our darkest thoughts in terms of, but what if we lose Hugo? Or what if something bad happens? Or what if, you know, at the start, what if he has a disability? We had some very tough conversations even during that time. And I am very thankful that I had a partner who is open, sorry, who is confident enough to have those conversations, who's, tough enough to face things with me and didn't kind of shy away from that. And we continue to check in with each other. I think that's really important, especially in the chaos of now, two other kids at home, and you can kind of lose sight of what's happened sometimes. You can kind of forget, not to sound horrible, there are moments where I forget what's happened, and
Yeah.
then I feel really guilty that I'm forgetting Micah. It's an emotional roller coaster. Um, but yeah, so checking in with each other constantly. On the professional side, in terms of help, I definitely had a few therapy sessions, and this was amazingly organized by my workplace. I don't think enough people know that, if something does occur, you can draw on your workplace in some circumstances to provide you with support. And my workplace was amazing with that, constantly checking in, offering that support service. And when I did accept that, organizing it for me as well, which was amazing. So I had a couple of those conversations, and then I felt like I had gotten to a place where I perhaps didn't need to have another session yet. And I say yet because I don't want people to think that, with grief, it's like, oh, I've had a couple of sessions, I've dealt with it, and I'm done. No, grief is not a like tick the box. It will come back. I know it will come back. I know I might,
with
in a
milestones.
year's time. Yeah, of course, I might be triggered. I might get to a point later in life where this, these sorts of feelings and this trauma and whatever has happened starts to, resurface in different ways. So I'm more than happy to draw back on that. So I want people to know that that's, really important, that they know that it's a lifelong opportunity to speak to people and take on that service. And then for me, I think it's the people around me on the outskirts. I'm a big extrovert in terms of I get a lot of energy from the people around me, and I get a lot of support, and I fill my cup with my friends and my family. And I need that now, and I needed that back when it happened, and I needed that throughout the challenges, and I will need that. So I make sure I put, things in place to be able to do that, whether it is catching up with my friends, whether it is going for a coffee with my sister, because I can have those quick chats. I can have a moment to mention how I'm feeling, or mention Micah and remember him. It's nice to be able to do that with the people around you.
Yeah. Nick, you have been amazing on the podcast. You have shared the highs, the lows, and the darkest moments in your current pregnancy and birthing of your boys. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure sharing your story and your vulnerability here on Wine with Weta. For anyone listening, for you to be a better version of yourself tomorrow, Nick, what word will you apply to yourself today?
Oh, you ask the tough questions, don't you?
Yes.
I would say relax. Just relax.
Ooh.
Do you
I listen think to your own advice though, Nick?
I don't,
Yeah.
and that's the advice I would give so many people, so many friends. But I need to take on myself, because I need a moment to relax, to take it all in, to cry, to laugh, just to be myself, to be with others. And that takes a moment to relax and lean into it.
I think the word to complement that is permission. Give yourself permission to stop. Give yourself permission to cry. Give yourself permission to relax. And for every mother who's a high achiever, who loves to get things done, ticking the checklist to feel accomplished, give yourself permission to just not do that, because it's so rewarding back to you. You don't have to do it all the time, just in bits.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces. For anyone that would love to contact Nick or Nikolina, I'll put her Instagram handle in the show notes, and her podcast. Please say it again, Nick. What is it? The Baby Playbook?
The Baby Playbook podcast. That is it.
It's your go-to once you've had your new bubba, or would love to refer it to a friend. And her great book, My Mum Loves Fudge. I think you should write another one. My Mum Loves Wine, or even matcha. Or matcha. That's the trend, right?
100%.
Thanks again, Nikolina, for coming on the podcast. And for everyone else, another episode will be brought to your ears really soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Weta. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.